Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
You are born into a system that feels natural because you never saw the version of life before it. From your first day of awareness, everything already exists. The rules, the expectations, the structures, the invisible boundaries. You inherit them before you question them. That is what makes it powerful. There is no moment where someone sits you down and explains the full picture. Instead, it is absorbed gradually, through routine, through repetition, through what everyone else treats as normal. When something is repeated long enough, it becomes truth without needing proof. That is how systems maintain control without appearing controlling. They do not need force. They rely on familiarity. You grow up believing this is simply how life works. And by the time you start asking deeper questions, you are already deeply embedded within it. Your habits are shaped, your beliefs are formed. Your direction has already been influenced. Escaping does not begin with rebellion. It begins with awareness. The moment you realize that what feels natural may actually be designed is the moment everything starts to shift. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And once you question it, you can no longer move through it blindly. The algorithm is one of the most subtle yet powerful forces shaping your behavior. To explain it simply, the algorithm is a system that decides what you see based on what keeps you engaged the longest. It learns your preferences, your habits, your attention patterns, and then feeds you more of the same. This creates a loop. You see what you like, you engage with it. The system gives you more. Over time, your perception of reality becomes narrower. You start to believe that what you see is all there is. That is the trap. Your thoughts feel original, yet they are being influenced continuously. The content you consume shapes how you think, what you believe, and even what you want. Winners recognize this pattern early. They understand that attention is currency. If you do not control where your attention goes, something else will. They curate their environment intentionally. They limit exposure to noise. They choose what they consume instead of passively accepting what is presented. Because once your attention is controlled, your direction follows. And once your direction is influenced, your outcomes are no longer entirely yours. The education system plays a foundational role in shaping how you think about life. At its core, it is designed to standardize learning. That means creating a structure where large numbers of people can be taught the same information in the same way. This creates consistency. It creates predictability, yet it also limits individuality. You are trained to follow instructions, meet deadlines, memorize information, and perform within predefined criteria. Creativity becomes secondary. Independent thinking becomes optional. Over time, this conditions you to seek approval rather than pursue curiosity. You learn to ask what is required instead of what is possible. This mindset carries into adulthood. You look for instructions. You wait for direction. Winners break this pattern. They shift from compliance to exploration. They question what they were taught, not to reject it entirely, but to understand its limitations. They build their own frameworks for learning. They focus on skills that matter in real environments, not just controlled settings. And most importantly, they stop waiting for permission to think differently. The banking system introduces another layer of control, one that operates through money. To understand it simply, the system is built on debt, interest, and long-term financial obligations. This creates a structure where people work not just to live, but to maintain commitments they have already made. Mortgages, loans, credit, these are not inherently harmful, yet they create pressure. They reduce flexibility. They make it harder to take risks. When your income is tied to obligations, your choices become limited. You cannot easily walk away. You cannot easily pivot. This creates stability for the system, yet constraint for the individual. Winners approach money differently. They prioritize control over consumption. They build buffers. They avoid unnecessary commitments that reduce their freedom. They understand that financial independence is not about wealth alone. It is about options. The ability to choose your path without being forced by external pressure. And that ability changes how you move through life. Politics operates at a broader level, shaping the environment in which all other systems function. At its simplest, politics is the process of decision-making that affects large groups of people. It determines laws, policies, and structures that influence daily life. Yet it also creates division. It encourages people to identify with sides, to defend positions, to focus on conflict rather than clarity. This keeps attention fragmented. It keeps energy directed outward rather than inward. Instead of focusing on personal growth or independent thinking, many become absorbed in debates that do not directly improve their lives. Winners remain aware of this dynamic. They stay informed without becoming consumed. They understand that while politics shapes the environment, it does not define their personal direction. They focus on what they can control. They invest their energy where it produces results, and they avoid getting trapped in cycles of outrage that lead nowhere. Social conditioning reinforces all of these systems by shaping behavior through expectations. To explain it simply, social conditioning is the process of learning what is considered acceptable based on the reactions of others. You observe what is rewarded and what is criticized. Over time, you adjust your behavior to fit those patterns. This creates conformity. It creates predictability. You begin to act in ways that align with external approval rather than internal alignment. This is not always conscious. It happens gradually. Through feedback, through observation, through repetition, winners become aware of this process. They notice when their actions are driven by expectation rather than intention. They question whether the approval they seek is even relevant to their goals, and when necessary, they choose discomfort over conformity. Because growth often requires stepping outside of what is socially accepted. Time becomes another tool within this system, often misunderstood and misused. To clarify, time itself is neutral. It passes regardless of what you do. The system shapes how you use it. Fixed schedules, structured routines, predefined milestones. These create a sense of order. They provide direction. Yet they also limit flexibility. You follow timelines that may not align with your own pace. You measure progress based on external standards. Winners redefine their relationship with time. They treat it as a resource to be allocated intentionally. They focus on outcomes rather than appearances. They understand that being busy does not equal being effective. And they prioritize activities that move them forward, even if those activities do not fit traditional timelines. This creates a different rhythm, one that is driven by purpose rather than expectation. Fear plays a central role in keeping people within these systems. It is not always obvious. It often appears as caution, as practicality, as responsibility. To explain it simply, fear is the anticipation of negative outcomes. It makes you avoid risk. It makes you choose safety. Within a structured system, this keeps everything stable. People stay in roles they do not enjoy. They avoid opportunities that feel uncertain. They prioritize security over growth. Winners recognize fear for what it is. They do not eliminate it. They understand it. They use it as a signal rather than a barrier. When something feels uncomfortable, they examine why. They distinguish between real risk and perceived risk. And when the opportunity outweighs the downside, they move forward despite the discomfort. This changes everything, because most people stop where fear begins. Escaping does not mean leaving society entirely. It means interacting with it consciously. To explain it simply, escape is not physical removal. It is mental independence. You still operate within systems, yet you are not controlled by them. You choose how you engage. You decide what to accept and what to reject. Winners do not isolate themselves. They navigate strategically. They use systems where beneficial. They avoid them where limiting. This requires awareness. It requires constant evaluation. It requires the ability to step back and see the bigger picture. Without that, it is easy to fall back into default patterns. With it, you create a life that is shaped by your choices rather than by external design. At the center of everything lies a realization that changes how you see the world. You are not competing against a single person or a single obstacle. You are navigating systems that are designed to maintain themselves. That does not make them evil. It makes them structured. And within that structure, your level of awareness determines your level of freedom. The sooner you understand how these systems operate, the sooner you can make decisions that align with your own direction. It is not about rejecting everything. It is about choosing deliberately. Because once you stop moving unconsciously, you stop being controlled by what you never questioned. Once you begin to see how systems shape your thinking, a deeper realization starts to emerge. You notice that moving through life, collecting experiences, does not automatically make you wise. It only makes you experienced. Experience is exposure to events. Wisdom is understanding the truth behind those events. These are not the same thing. You can repeat the same patterns for years and still remain unchanged internally. Many people confuse time spent with growth achieved. They assume that simply going through life will refine them. Yet, if the mind interpreting those experiences remains conditioned, the conclusions drawn from them remain limited. You react based on what you were taught to believe, not based on what you actually see. That is why two people can go through the same situation and come out with completely different levels of insight. One repeats the pattern. The other understands it. The difference lies in awareness, and awareness does not come from experience alone. It comes from questioning the lens through which that experience is interpreted. Conditioning forms that lens long before you realize it exists. It is the set of beliefs, assumptions, and mental frameworks you inherit from your environment. Family, culture, education, media. These shape how you interpret reality. They tell you what is right, what is wrong, what matters, what does not. Over time, these ideas feel like your own. You defend them. You build your identity around them. Yet most of them were never chosen consciously. This is what keeps people from accessing wisdom. They are not seeing reality directly. They are seeing it through layers of inherited interpretation. Every experience is filtered through those layers. That means the conclusions they draw are also filtered. They are not discovering truth. They are reinforcing what they already believe. Liberation begins when you recognize this filter, when you start to question whether your thoughts are truly yours or simply echoes of what you have been taught. That moment creates distance between you and your conditioning, and in that distance, clarity begins to form. Wisdom requires a different kind of attention. It is not about collecting more information. It is about observing without distortion. That means seeing situations as they are, not as you expect them to be. Most people do not do this. They interpret everything through bias. They look for confirmation of what they already believe. This creates a closed loop. Experience enters, gets filtered, and exits as reinforcement. Nothing changes. Wisdom breaks this loop. It requires you to suspend judgment, even temporarily. To look at a situation without immediately labeling it, without attaching it to past experiences. This is difficult because the mind is trained to categorize quickly. It wants certainty. It wants conclusions. Winners slow this process down. They observe longer. They question their own interpretations. They ask whether their reaction is based on reality or on habit. This creates space for deeper understanding. And in that space, wisdom develops. There is also a difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic. It is driven by conditioning. It happens without awareness. Responding is deliberate. It requires presence. It requires a moment of pause between stimulus and action. Most people live in reaction. They respond to situations based on patterns they have repeated for years. Anger, avoidance, approval, seeking. These patterns feel natural because they are familiar. Yet they limit growth. Wisdom emerges when you break that automatic cycle. When you create that pause. When you choose your response instead of defaulting to habit. This shift changes how you experience everything. Situations that once triggered you lose their control. You begin to see options where you previously saw only one path. And over time, this creates a level of freedom that cannot be achieved through experience alone. Liberation of the mind means stepping outside of these automatic patterns. It means recognizing that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of those thoughts. This distinction is critical. If you believe every thought you have, you remain trapped within your conditioning. If you observe your thoughts, you create distance from them. That distance allows you to question them, to evaluate them, to decide whether they serve you or not. Most people never reach this point. They live inside their thoughts, not outside of them. They assume that what they think is what is true. That assumption limits everything. Liberation begins when you see that your mind can be trained, that your patterns can be changed, that your perspective is not fixed. This realization opens the door to wisdom, because once you are no longer bound by automatic thinking, you can start to see things as they are. Society does not encourage this kind of liberation. It encourages conformity. It rewards predictable behavior. It values efficiency over introspection. Questioning your own mind does not fit neatly into structured systems. It does not produce immediate results. It creates uncertainty. That is why most people avoid it. They stay within familiar patterns because those patterns are reinforced by their environment. Breaking free requires stepping away from that reinforcement. It requires spending time in reflection, in observation, in silence. These are not activities that society prioritizes. Yet they are essential for developing wisdom. Winners create this space intentionally. They disconnect from noise. They allow themselves to think without constant input. And in that quiet, they begin to see things differently. They begin to notice patterns they were previously blind to. And those patterns become the foundation for deeper understanding. Another barrier to wisdom is attachment to identity. People build a sense of self based on beliefs, roles, and past experiences. They become attached to being a certain kind of person. This attachment creates resistance to change. If new information challenges that identity, it is rejected. Not because it is false, but because it threatens the sense of self. This prevents growth. Wisdom requires flexibility. It requires the ability to update your understanding without feeling like you are losing yourself. Winners detach from rigid identity. They see themselves as evolving. They allow their beliefs to change when new insights emerge. This creates openness. It allows them to learn continuously. Without that openness, experience becomes repetitive. You keep reinforcing the same version of yourself, even when it no longer serves you. There is also the illusion of knowledge. Many people believe they understand more than they do. They accumulate information and assume it translates to insight. This creates confidence without depth. It prevents further questioning. When you think you already know, you stop exploring. Wisdom requires humility. It requires recognizing the limits of your understanding. This does not mean doubting yourself constantly. It means staying open to new perspectives. It means acknowledging that there is always more to learn. Winners maintain this mindset. They do not become complacent. They continue to question, to explore, to refine their understanding. This keeps their thinking dynamic. It prevents stagnation, and over time it leads to deeper insight. The process of liberation is not immediate. It unfolds gradually. You start by noticing small patterns, automatic reactions, repeated thoughts. Over time, you begin to question them. You experiment with different responses. You observe the outcomes. This creates a feedback loop. Awareness leads to change. Change leads to new experience. New experience leads to deeper awareness. This cycle builds on itself. It transforms how you think, how you act, how you see the world. Most people never enter this cycle. They remain within the loop of conditioning. They repeat patterns without questioning them. And as a result, their experiences do not translate into wisdom. They remain at the surface level, regardless of how much they go through. At the center of all this lies a quiet truth that changes everything once you see it clearly. Wisdom is not something that happens to you over time. It is something you cultivate through awareness. Experience provides the material. Liberation of the mind determines what you do with it. Without liberation, experience becomes repetition. With liberation, experience becomes insight. The difference is not in what happens to you. It is in how you see it. And once you begin to see clearly, you realize that wisdom was never out of reach. It was simply hidden behind the patterns you never questioned. Once you begin to break free from conditioned thinking, your attention shifts towards something far more powerful than routine or reaction. You start to realize that direction alone is not enough. You need something that sits above direction. That is where vision comes in. Vision is not a goal. It is a long-range mental image of a future that does not yet exist, yet feels real enough to guide your actions. Goals are specific targets. Vision is the landscape those targets belong to. Without vision, goals become scattered. You chase outcomes without understanding how they connect. With vision, every action gains context. Every decision aligns with something larger than the moment. This is why the highest paid individuals are not just workers. They are thinkers who can see beyond immediate tasks. They design paths. They solve problems that others cannot even identify. Their value comes from perspective, not just effort. And that perspective begins with a clear vision that pulls their actions forward. Most people operate without vision, even if they are busy every day. They focus on tasks, deadlines, responsibilities. They move from one requirement to the next without stepping back to see where it all leads. This creates motion without direction. It feels productive, yet it lacks cohesion. Vision changes that. It acts as a filter. It helps you decide what matters and what does not. When you have a clear picture of where you are going, distractions lose their appeal. Opportunities can be evaluated quickly. You no longer say yes to everything. You say yes to what aligns. This simplifies decision-making. It reduces noise. It creates focus. Winners rely on this clarity. They do not chase every possibility. They commit to a path that reflects their vision, even when it means ignoring options that look attractive on the surface. Vision must extend beyond your current identity. If it only reflects what you already believe is possible, it will not change you. It will reinforce your current limits. A real vision stretches you. It forces you to think differently. It challenges your assumptions about what you can achieve. This is where belief becomes a barrier. Many people shrink their vision to fit what feels realistic. They avoid imagining something bigger. because it creates discomfort. It exposes the gap between where they are and where they could be. Winners lean into that discomfort. They allow their vision to expand beyond current limitations. They understand that belief can be developed. It is not fixed. By repeatedly engaging with a larger vision, they begin to normalize it. What once felt impossible starts to feel achievable, and that shift changes how they act. There is also an emotional component that most people overlook. Vision is not just a mental image. It must carry emotional weight. It must feel compelling enough to sustain effort over time. Without that emotional connection, vision becomes abstract. It does not influence behavior. It remains an idea rather than a driving force. When you immerse yourself in the details of your vision, when you imagine how it feels, how it looks, how it changes your life, it begins to take on a different quality. It becomes real in your mind before it becomes real in your environment.